Welcome to Wasabi Interviews, where we talk to interesting people in Hawaii, Japan, and beyond. My name is Antonio Vega, and today we're joined by a man with many titles. He's an award-winning author, he's a retinal surgeon, ophthalmologist, assistant professor at the University of Massachusetts Medical School.
That's right.
I hope I got that
That's
right.
Where I am. That's right.
Yes. Dr. Andrew Lamb.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, so it's a pleasure to be talking to you. We've corresponded through email a bunch of times, and it's been very nice talking to you. But it's nice to finally.
Well, it's always great to connect with anything related to Honolulu and Hawaii, because when I lived there, it was the best year of my life. So best time of my life.
So around when were you here, by the way?
So after I graduated from med school, I did my medical internship in Hawaii, and I was at Queens and Kuakini and Tripler. So that was I think it was 2002 to 2003. Believe me, it doesn't seem like that long ago, but I guess it was. But it was great. It was great. Learned a lot. Had a wonderful time.
So, I do want to, of course, discuss your most recent book. I think it's, do you have it on hand there? It's called, wonderful.
I have a picture. Yeah, it's right here.
Wonderful.
There. Repentance.
About
the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, a novel.
Yeah.
And actually, the idea for this novel actually came during that year I was in Honolulu, because I met, randomly it seemed, I met 442nd veterans. I remember one of the first weekends, a friend from college took me to his church. I still remember it was Kalihi Union Church. And he knew I was really into World War II history, which is what I had studied in college. Yeah. And he said, he elbowed me. He's like, that guy over there was in the 442nd. And he was just a guy in the other pew. And I just introduced myself. And that was probably one of half a dozen veterans I met during that time I was living there. Sometimes I would just visit Pearl Harbor. When you go to Hawaii, you get visitors a lot, as you know, and you keep taking them back to the same places. So I literally went to Pearl Harbor maybe half a dozen times, maybe more times. But there's a lot of docents there who are very, very interested in sharing their history. Not every veteran wants to do that, but obviously these dedicated veterans at the national park were very, very interested in sharing their stories. So that kind of helped me realize what an amazing group of heroes they were.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about your background in history and all that, but since we're on the topic of repentance, could you briefly just give an idea what the book is about, so people that are interested can have an idea, what the plot is, all that kind of stuff. No spoilers though, of course.
Okay, sure. Well, it's really about a Japanese American war hero, but he has a huge secret. It's a secret that's so bad that he's refused to talk about the war ever. And his son, it's kind of like a dual timeline story. So there's the World War II part, and then the part around the late 90s. And his son is this world famous cardiac surgeon, but he's estranged from his father. And the government, for some reason, starts to come knocking, asking about the details about what his father did in the war. And something really bad happened, in the battlefields in France, but nobody seems to know what. And so it starts the son on this journey of discovery. Forces him to interact with his dad again, takes him to California, then to the battlefields in France. And basically, it's like the onions peeled away. Family secret after family secret is revealed, and you realize what this man did in the war. And it has shocking and earth-shattering consequences for the family, and of course, it's based on the amazing story of the 442nd, which is the main character was in that, obviously. And that's, for those who don't know, I'm sure many of your listeners already do, but that's a group of volunteers who are Japanese American. 2/3 came from Hawaii, 1/3 came from approximately from the internment camps. And these are guys who had families interned in camps like Manzanar and other camps at home. And they fought with amazing valor. I mean, they're the most decorated unit in U.S. military history per capita. They had 21 medals of honor, 52 distinguished service crosses. And they really had a very, very positive impact. In fact, Hawaii's statehood in 1959, I think, owes a lot to the reputation and the dedication that they demonstrated, right? So they showed any naysayers, especially in Congress, that Asian Americans could be very, very loyal and could be self-sacrificial and true Americans. And of course, these soldiers, their main motivation was to prove themselves, because they were in a very difficult position. They were guilty, or they felt guilty, not because they had done anything wrong or they were responsible for Pearl Harbor or anything like that, but because they were guilty just because they looked like the enemy. You know, the land of their ancestors was now America's enemy. So they would do anything possible to show that they were true and loyal Americans, and that motivated them.
Yeah, I think that, their story is not so well known to many people in the mainland, but of course here in Hawaii, it's,
Of course.
a big deal, big deal. And, even I myself, I had kind of generally heard about, the 442, the 100 Battalion before I came to Hawaii, but after I came here, I really, was like, oh, wow, this is a big deal. I should know more about this. And of course, working through Wasabi, I've learned so much. It's such a big part of the history here, especially.
Yeah, one of my goals in writing it was simply to share the story with more Americans. This isn't a true, wonderful American story that I think everybody should know, for sure.
Yeah. So I find, the transition that you made from, so you went to Yale and you were studying history and then you went into medicine. So I assume you were already, generally familiar with the 442 through your interest in history, right?
I have to admit, when I was in high school, I had heard of them, but I didn't know that much about them. My family's Chinese American, but in college, I learned more about them. Of course, I knew about Senator Inouye, Daniel Inouye, who was a second longest serving senator in U.S. history. He was a senator from Hawaii, and he won the Congressional Medal of Honor, lost his right arm in action in April in Italy in 1945. So he was a true hero of the 442nd. So I knew about them, but it wasn't until I started researching the book that I basically tried to read everything possible, everything written about them, essentially, in the research for my novel. So now I know much more about them. And of course, I've been lucky to interview veterans. There are fewer and fewer veterans with us.
Yeah.
One of the best resources was a man who became a friend. His name was Susumu Ito. He was actually, he was in the artillery unit of the 442nd. And after the war, he went to college on the GI Bill, and he became a cell biologist and a professor at Harvard Medical School. And he lived in Wellesley, which is not that far from where I live. So when I was doing the research and I was connecting with people in the military and historians, and more than one person said, you've got to meet Dr. Ito. And so I went to meet Dr. Ito, and he was wonderful. I mean, he showed me all his memorabilia. He talked to me about all his experiences. He won the Bronze Star in the rescue of the Lost Battalion, and he was very humble, like I think many of these veterans were.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he passed away in 2015, but he was a very, very wonderful man. So, like a lot of these veterans were.
Oh, so did Dr. Ito? Where was he originally from?
He was from Stockton, California, and his family was interned in Rower, Arkansas.
Yeah.
That's the same camp that like George Takei, Mr. Sulu from Star Trek, they were in that camp.
Oh, wow.
So he showed me photo albums where he went back in his uniform and visited Arkansas, and his family was in the camps. So those were a couple of the worst camps. Jerome and Rower were in Arkansas. All of them were in very isolated places. Nobody would ever want to live in these places, like Manzanar and Heart Mountain and the middle of Arizona, Poston. But these ones in Arkansas were pretty bad because they were like built on reclaimed swampland. When they got there after like a 5-day train ride across the United States, they basically realized that the camps weren't even built yet. Yeah. And on that train ride, by the way, a lot of these people had kids, right? So anyone who's traveled with kids, it's painful. And on this 5-day train ride, it was like nonstop. All the windows were pulled down because they were told that if white people saw them, it might incite a riot. And there were armed guards on the trains. I mean, it was a very brutal, it's a difficult situation. It was bad. So we can't forget these things, right? Because
absolutely,
they're a part of our history. And even if we are not Japanese American, we know that history can repeat itself if we do not remember it, right?
Yeah, the worst thing is to forget it, because then there's nothing to learn from it, and we're more bound to just repeat it again and again, right? Just horrible. So when this book, Repentance, it came out, was it in 2019?
Yep, it came out about a year ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you were already doing research on this several years prior, it seems.
Oh yeah, these books, they take a long time. It probably took 6 years from my first idea to writing it, working with an agent to try to make it as good as possible, get the publishing deal. And then even after you sign your publishing deal, it's a year before it comes out. So it's kind of like a labor of love, you know?
Yeah.
So these things take a long time.
Ooh, okay. But it seems like it's been pretty well received, right? Like it got an award recently, and it's like up for another one.
Yeah, it's great. I've been first of all, I should say I've been very appreciative of the way it's been received in the Japanese American community, and especially among veterans. But of course, my main purpose in writing it was to reach people who didn't already know about the 440 seconds, and to reach a lot of, like, you know, Caucasian Americans, other Americans who have no idea about their history. So I was very gratified that it recently won the Independent Press Award for 2020, which was a great recognition that I appreciated. It's also up for the Massachusetts Book Award, which in my state, we're really proud of. There's a lot of writers in Massachusetts, and we're really usually proud of our public schools and our universities. So that's something that I've followed for many years, and I've always appreciated those who have won that award. So no, it's great. You know, you never know what's going to happen when you write a book, if people are going to read it, if they're going to enjoy it. So I've been very glad that people seem to have liked it, and that's resonated with a lot of people.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. I will, of course, make sure to include links in the description and the details and all that. So I wanted to ask you about that transition from history to medicine. So you go to college and you start studying history. What would lead you to say, okay, I've studied enough history, let me go into medicine?
You know, I was somebody who was probably pretty interested in medicine early on, mainly because my dad was an interventional cardiologist, and I grew up in Springfield, Illinois, which was a very, you know, is the middle of the plains, and it was a small city. And when I was growing up, it wasn't unusual for literally like strangers on the street to stop me, and get down on one knee at my level, and ask me if I was going to be a great doctor like my dad. Like that would happen at least maybe once a month. I mean, because he was going in to basically open up coronary arteries of people who were having heart attacks. And that was really, really fulfilling for him. And I could see that. And so I could tell that that would be a really great career if I went that way. But I also was thrilled to go to college, because I think it was really great to finally get to study what you wanted to really study, right? And in high school, I think I had got to study history for 2 years. And as you may remember, history is rarely high school kids' favorite subject. It's far from it, right? So I was thrilled that I could go to college and pick the classes that I wanted to learn. And that's when I learned that, like, if you're interested in something, it's a lot easier to do well at it. So that was really great. And so in college, I got to study what I wanted to. But I always kind of knew, I always kind of had interest in going to medical school after that. I, of course, wanted to try to learn from all my classmates and be exposed to all different fields. But in the end, when I thought about going to history grad school, and I did think about it, I mean, when you're in the history major and you've got all of these world famous professors teaching you, and they're your mentors, of course, you're influenced by them. And if they show interest in you or think you have promise, then you're flattered. All those things are part of it. But I also felt like if I was a history professor, I might be a little bit, I would devote my life to maybe studying a very esoteric subject and maybe writing books, but books that were academic that very few people would actually read. And I felt like I enjoyed helping people a lot, and I thought going to medicine would be better. So I was interested in applying to medical school, because at the time, it's a little different from now. Most people who went to medical school were like science majors. That's the thing. And so I was like a humanities major. And I had, of course, I took all the pre-med courses and took the MCAT and all those things. But you had to, if you're applying to like the best medical schools, you have to usually demonstrate that you're really, you know, the people who get those are very, very, those spots are often very scientific. And I was kind of going in there saying, hey, I'm a history major. And today it's ironic, because I think these top med schools, they kind of brag that more than half their students were humanities majors, and they think that's really great. But I don't think it was the case 20 years ago, because I remember some of these interviews, and the people who I guess were my dad's generation interviewing me didn't really think that being a history major was that great, or it wasn't going to lead, didn't mean that wasn't gonna be helpful as a doctor.
Right.
But obviously I was lucky to get a spot at a school that I really liked, and and of course you don't really use what you learned in college when you're a doctor. You really just train to be in America. We train to be very, very specialized. I don't even use most of what I learned in med school, to be honest.
So just pure curiosity on my part, because you just mentioned how schools today, they like to kind of brag that they have, humanities students. Is that just because they're trying to kind of have more variety and kind of say like, our doctors have a different way of thinking, kind of thing?
That's right. Like there's a pendulum, right? So I mean, schools, they like to say that they're different, and they like to brag. I think today that their diversity is really important. Diversity in every sense: racial diversity, economic diversity, academic diversity. So if obviously most of the students who applied med school are still science majors, but I do think that now, at least from my alumni newsletters and magazines, they seem to highlight how many people were English majors and history majors and psychology majors and things like that.
Oh. Yeah, I have no idea about
and I think
that, but
that's fine. I mean, I think that as long as you have the capacity to learn, you can learn medicine, basically.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and you never know, right? Like this sort of different approach to problem solving can often be helpful, right? Like if you have a different background.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you're a humanities major, if you're in English or history, you've learned to communicate better than if you were just pure science. You're a good writer, you're good at communicating. So
like yourself.
Maybe, I don't know.
Hey, you won a couple awards.
Well,
you got something.
Yeah, that's good. Something to show for it.
So, all right. So then you go into ophthalmology. You said your dad was in cardiology. What led you into ophthalmology specifically?
So even though I was very proud of my dad, and I was very, very overawed, in fact, at the lives he was saving, I also saw that he worked really hard. So literally, it was quite rare to have dinner together as a family, for example. And at that, in his day, doctors of his era, medicine and your profession in general was your identity, right? And I will also say, and I don't think this is untrue, that dads back in the day, they didn't have to do as much as dads do today. Like I'm basically, before COVID, I was a chauffeur. I mean, people ask me how I spend my time. I guess I do surgery, I see patients, but really, I feel like I have 4 kids. We drive them to all their activities all day long. I'm a carpool expert, and of course we're very involved as parents going on. So, I think that this is part of the reason why lifestyle choices are a big part of the newer generation of doctors, and people want to have a life outside of medicine. So this is why fields like mine and other fields that are a little less demanding, perhaps like dermatology, radiology, ophthalmology, are very, very popular. So I knew I wanted to be a surgeon because I loved operating and helping people and getting immediate results. I wanted to have a better lifestyle than my dad so that I could pursue other interests like writing or having a family. And I also happened to love the eye. I was one of these kids, like a lot of Asian kids, were myopic at a young age. So I still remember the moment I put on glasses for the first time, and it was like I didn't realize how blind I had been, and I could finally see like the blackboard in school. And then every year I'd go back to the eye doctor, and I would enjoy it because I was like getting clearer vision again. And so, unlike going to the dentist, when the eye doctor was really neat, and then when you learn about all the amazing things that ophthalmologists get to do, like LASIK surgery, which is like so futuristic, you zap someone's corneas with laser and now they don't need glasses anymore, or cataract surgery takes a few minutes, and retinal surgeons, like I'm a retinal surgeon, retinal surgeons are putting in retinal microchips to return some sight. It's rudimentary sight, but some sight to blind people. And it's been, I think ophthalmologists have been very lucky because our field has just been very blessed by the advances that have taken place in the last 30, 40 years. So I think that although many doctors, to be honest, we get burned out, we get fed up with the hassles from insurance companies and government regulations.
Mm-hmm.
But on the whole, I think ophthalmologists are very, very happy. Mm-hmm. It's a rare field where I think the ophthalmologists still like their kids to go into ophthalmology,
right.
Whereas, to be honest, like a lot of doctors I've found in general don't really recommend the field to their kids because it's many years, lots of delayed gratification, mm-hmm. lots of delayed earning, lots of debt for mm-hmm. medical school, college and medical school. So it's a grind. And today, to be honest, unlike in my father's time when doctors were really kind of put on a pedestal mm-hmm. and they were really respected, now insurance companies especially make it seem like any doctor is as good as another. Doctors are almost just a technician. Mm-hmm. And you don't get paid any more by an insurance company or by Medicare if you're the world's expert at something versus the kid who just came out of residency.
Right.
It's basically like when you get your insurance, you basically are told just pick a doctor.
Right.
And the public is supposed to assume that they're all the same.
Exactly.
But of course they're not. But that's the system we're in.
Yeah.
There's a lot of great things about the American health system, and of course we all know there's a lot of problems.
Yeah, there's plenty of problems. That's a whole other thing.
Yes, that could be another couple hours to discuss.
Oh yeah. So I was reading an interview that you did a while ago, but you were talking about how when somebody goes to the eye doctor, they have a clear problem, and you can say in most. It's right in front of them. They can see it with their own eyes, so to speak, right? And so they come with you for help, and it's a different dynamic from like what you get with interactions with many other doctors, right?
That's right. So when you go to medical school, the main decision point you have to make is are you going to go into medicine or surgery? Mm-hmm. And so medicine is like for people who are very cerebral. They mm-hmm. like to think and solve problems, but surgeons are for people who just want to fix something usually and get it done. In my dad's day, the best medical students went into medicine, and only the bad medical students or the dummies, or I'm being facetious, went into surgery. Like there's the jokes like if you're in the elevator, if you're in the elevator and the door's closing, but you want to stop at a medicine, doctor will put his hand in there, but a surgeon will put his head in between the doors to stop it. So there's all these jokes, but obviously in recent decades, as I said, to be honest, some of the surgical subspecialties became much more lucrative than the medicine subspecialty. So, and then some of them are like these, like ophthalmology. They're kind of like niche, kind of ENT. They're very specialized and with better lifestyles. So, so that's kind of one of the reasons why people choose what they want to do. I guess.
Yeah. And like I was saying, I think the patient is more willing to accept a lot of times those we have to do surgery, we have to do this, whatever the treatment is, because it's such a obvious problem for them.
That's right.
Like, I can't see this.
The surgeon's mentality is indeed, as you alluded to, very different. So. Yeah. People, for example, get referred to me by regular ophthalmologists because they're going blind from a retinal detachment or have a macular hole or because their cataract surgery didn't go well, and we have to kind of save the situation. And the patient already kind of knows that when they get to me that something needs to be done, and they already are literally have lost vision or are legally blind or blind or going blind, and it's not difficult to. You don't have to convince anybody that something needs to be done. It's either we're going to get better and we're going to try and make it better, or we're just going to not try and it'll stay bad. So that, in a way, it's good and bad, right? So the stakes are always very high. So when it doesn't work out or when I fail, because all surgeons fail, all doctors fail, it's tragic. It's terrible. I feel terrible. The patient obviously feels worse. But at the same time, as long as you're trying your best all the time, every day, all the time, you don't have to feel like you don't have to beat yourself up too much, because as long as you're well trained and you did your best, nobody else around is going to do it any better. Then you just accept what happens. So, I think it's a lot easier when you're starting from I get to start from a starting point that's very bad. with most of my patients. Now, even in ophthalmology, there are other situations where it's not like that. So LASIK surgery is an example where you could be correctable to 20/20 with contacts and glasses, but you might just want to get LASIK surgery. And that will go perfectly the vast majority of the time. But every once in a while, you might get a complication. And that's, to me, that would be even more brutal, because you've taken somebody who could have seen 20/20 and you have an infection or a catastrophe. And, you know, those are very rare. And obviously any doctor is going to go over the risks and the benefits of any procedure. So yeah, but I obviously have a lot of respect for medicine doctors who know a lot. They definitely have learned a lot, and their fund of knowledge has to be very good, because you have to constantly be wondering, could it be this infectious cause? Could it be this inflammatory cause? Could it be a metastatic or neoplastic or tumor or cancer or anything like that? So those are all possibilities. And I think that when they find out what's wrong, that can make a huge difference in the lives of the patients, many of whom who have been frustrated because they haven't found answers from many other doctors, right? So you can really make a difference in all fields of medicine, for sure. I recommend medicine to anyone who's interested in it. I know it's a long road, but it's also a long life for most of us, right? So, you know, I find very few people who truly regret it, regret going into it.
So, you know, last area here that I wanted to ask you about as we're wrapping up, but you did write a book that, well, it's called Saving Sight, and it deals with, you know, your own personal experiences. There you go. Training, and also kind of history of ophthalmology and doctors that made breakthroughs in the field, right? So
that's right.
I happen to be legally blind. I find this whole area very, very interesting. And so I was wondering, like, you recall a lot of, you know, like your training, for example, I was reading an interview where you were talking about how the first time you were trying to remove a contact, I believe, and that was really hard, right?
No, I think it was a cataract.
Oh, it was a cataract. Sorry.
Yes, I told stories about learning how to do cataract surgeries. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, so I was wondering, like, what was a challenging aspect that you particularly remember from, you know, when you were still training to become, you know, a retinal surgeon, ophthalmologist?
Yeah, so the Saving Sight book is full of those stories. I mean, I write about the difficulty of taking a metal foreign body out of a guy's eye, which was like, I had no idea how. At one point, I was like, "What am I going to do here? Am I going to get this out?" Cataract surgery is actually a very routine surgery. It's so elegant and fast, but I was humbled because when I was learning how to do it, there are steps that are so delicate that I had seen it done so many times. I was like thinking, I'm going to be great at this, and in actuality, I wasn't at the beginning, because it actually takes a lot of expertise. I mean, I've seen so many surgeons make it look so easy. So I was like literally peeling like the gossamer capsule of the lens, and it's all clear, right? You literally see through the lens. And so you have to train yourself to see things that are translucent or literally transparent based on how tissue is reacting. So it really gives you an appreciation for how far our field has come. So, you know, that book was indeed, originally, because of my love of history, I was so enthralled with the amazing historical stories of innovation in ophthalmology. Like, just briefly, like the artificial lens, which we all get after cataract surgery, the idea for that, to give people perfect vision after cataract surgery, was in World War II. There was an ophthalmologist who examined a fighter pilot who had been shot down during the Battle of Britain, and that pilot, unfortunately, had German bullets had shattered his plexiglass canopy, and the plexiglass had gone into his eyes. And what the ophthalmologist realized was these pieces of plexiglass were not being rejected by the body. They were inert. And he said, wait a second, right now we take out cataracts and don't put anything in there. And it's just, people can't see unless they wear like these Coke bottle glasses that are like funhouse distorted in the periphery and not very good vision. What if we created an artificial lens out of plexiglass, which the body will not reject, because I see it in this pilot? Maybe we can like restore sight that way. And now literally cataract surgery is the #1 surgery form in the world. Everyone will get it if they live long enough, basically. And it's amazing. So I wrote this book about these amazing historical stories. And I remember my agent said, you know, I don't think this is going to work. And I said, why not? I was totally crestfallen. And she said, well, I think that it's hard to believe the general public will buy a medical nonfiction book, much less an ophthalmological nonfiction book.
Right, right.
And so I was really sad, and I was kind of annoyed, but then I knew she was right? Because she doesn't want to waste time with books that aren't going to sell.
Sure. Yeah.
But then I said, I didn't want to give up. So I said, what if I blended those stories with my own stories as a surgeon in training, and basically was very honest about what it's like to be a surgeon, what it's like to have triumphs, what it's like to come up against difficult complications and not know what to do, or to fail, what it's really like. And I think that's probably what helped that book take off. And I think it was an Amazon bestseller, and it's very, I still get emails and letters from ophthalmology residents and medical students saying that they read the book and it inspired them to go into ophthalmology and stuff like that. So that's really gratifying, But in the end, any surgeon, it is a very humbling experience. I think that you have all the highs and all the lows and everything in between.
Yeah. I think, adding that personal layer, I mean, it's something that I've seen in Wasabi as well in our stories. You can tell a travel story, for example, and I can tell you about a famous temple in Japan, but when I tell you, what I felt when I went there and what I learned when I went there, then suddenly you're connecting with the reader, right?
Absolutely. And to me, that's kind of why I got into historical fiction, because nonfiction books I love, but the beauty of historical fiction is you can really not only reach a lot of readers who wouldn't necessarily want to pick up a nonfiction history book and teach them the history that's very involved with your story that you're trying to tell, but you can, by having characters and, like you said, expressing what they're seeing, what they're feeling, and their histories, you can really gain a lot of empathy. I think the reader gets a lot of empathy about what it's like to be in a different time and place. So I love historical fiction.
Yeah. And you also have like the plot moving it forward, right? So you want to find out what happens next, and then you end up learning a whole bunch in the process, right?
That's the idea. That's the idea.
Yeah. Wonderful. So so Repentance is of course out, available pretty much probably anywhere, any major
everywhere.
place.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, if people are going to bookstores anymore, but you can definitely get it online, obviously.
Definitely. Yeah. Saving Sight. Of course, I saw that on Amazon as well.
Thank you.
And then your second book was Two Sons
of China.
Sons of China. Yes. So
so I had. Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. That's a World War II book about Americans who fought in China during World War II. So.
Yes. So wonderful. I will include all those links.
Appreciate that.
Thank you so much for making time. I know you're a busy guy, but I appreciate the chat. So thank you so much.
Aloha.
Take care.
Take care.